The Justin Fields era is over, but a quarterback change cannot stop the Jets from losing their 7th game of 2025. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Sunday, October 19th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets, and today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. On today's show, we are here to recap the 7th loss for the New York Jets in 7 games in 2025. They fell to the Carolina Panthers at MetLife Stadium 13-6 in Week 7 action. We'll discuss how hopeless things seem for this team. We'll discuss just how bad this offense was from top to bottom, but we really have to zoom in and talk about the quarterback play in this game. It was another dreadful performance by Justin Fields, and it led to his benching at halftime. And quite frankly, when I was watching that game, I did not think the Jets had a choice but to bench Justin Fields at halftime because, once again, as we've seen so often this season, particularly in the last 3 weeks, Justin Fields looked completely lost. I mean, you can talk about the stats, 6 for 12, 46 yards. I mean, that's just dreadful. That's 3.8 yards per attempt. That's incredibly inefficient. You can talk about the eyeball test, where, once again, he just looked lost back there. And watching this game, I had to question why the Jets even started him. You know, we talked a lot about this heading into the game. And my very tentative view was that I leaned toward the Jets starting Fields over Tyrod Taylor. But a lot of this was based on the hope that, Fields could bounce back from his poor performance against Denver and the poor performance against Dallas 2 weeks ago. And the hope was not that his confidence was completely gone. That was something only the coaching staff could know. And the coaching staff should have been able to gauge that in practice this week. They should have been able to gauge it by being around Justin Fields. And what we saw from Justin Fields this week was the same thing we've seen from Justin Fields through much of the season. Really, in many ways, the same thing we've seen from Justin Fields after week 1, after he lit it up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He looked lost out there. And there was one sequence that really stuck out to me. It was the sequence before the 2-minute drill, the last drive of the half, where the Jets started to move the ball a little bit and it stalled out. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the series before that, because that sequence was handoff to Breece Hall, false start, screen to Allen Lazard, and that just shows you how little confidence the Jets coaches had in Justin Fields. And I don't blame them. I don't see how any coaching staff could have confidence in a quarterback playing the way Justin Fields was playing, not just this game, but through pretty much the entire 2025 season beside week 1. But if you have so little confidence that you're making play calls like that, why is he even in the game to begin with? I don't think Tyrod Taylor did many good things in the second half of this game, but it was clear the offense looked better. The comparison I was drawing was last season when the Jets changed play callers. They went from Nathaniel Hackett to Todd Downing. And Todd Downing is probably a bottom 5 play caller in this league. But things looked appreciably better once Todd Downing took over. Tyrod Taylor is not a starting quarterback in this league at this point in time, if he ever was. I think there was maybe a little stretch with Buffalo where he was a quality starter. Those days are long gone. Tyrod Taylor has not been a full-time starter in this league for 8 years. And Tyrod Taylor did not play a good game. Tyrod Taylor threw a couple interceptions, and he missed a couple throws that could have been touchdowns. He took a bad sack or 2 in this game, but still, the offense actually looked like it was capable of occasionally moving the ball when Tyrod Taylor was in there. And as I was watching this first half unfold, I couldn't understand why the Jets did not just go with Tyrod Taylor, because I wonder whether the Jets may have been able to cobble together enough offense. And look, they were never going to be able to light up the scoreboard with this group at wide receivers, with this group, with everything that's going on with the offense. They were never going to be able to light up the scoreboard, but they did not have to do that. For the second straight week, the defense held the opponent to 13 points. And for the second straight week, the New York Jets lost a game where they held their opponent to 13 points. And a lot of it goes back to the quarterback position. And Fields played the first half of this game. He was miserable. He was lost out there. And there was, you go back to the first series of this game. I don't understand what the Jets were doing there. I don't understand why they went for it on fourth down and passed up a 50-yard field goal with Nick Folk. Last week, the coaching staff took a lot of grief for passing up a 62-yard field goal on the last drive. And I don't think that was fair because, first of all, it's a 62-yard field goal. Second of all, the evidence Folk could have made a 62-yard field goal seems to be a shorter kick he made a couple weeks earlier in much more favorable conditions in Miami. And also, as I've talked about a lot over the last week, I was at the game in London last week. Folk was coming up short from 57 in pregame warm. So he could not have gotten the ball there from 60. He could not have gotten the ball there from 62. On the first drive of the game, the Jets passed up what would have been a 50-yard field goal. And then instead they went for it on a 4th and 5. And what I really don't understand is that before that sequence, they had the ball. It was 3rd and 5, and they threw a pass. And then on 4th and 5, they threw a second pass. And you know how much Fields is struggling. So I don't understand why you wouldn't run like a quarterback draw on one of those plays and gotten it shorter. And I don't understand why they went for it when you have a quarterback who's struggling to the extent Fields is. You have a quarterback who's just not seeing the field. When you have a quarterback who's like too hesitant to even throw, why are you putting him in a position on a 4th down play where he's got to make a pass? Why are you calling back-to-back passes on 3rd and 5 and 4th and 5? You have an opportunity to at least get something positive out of that drive. This is an offense that's been really struggling, a quarterback that's struggling badly. And points on the first drive, I don't know if it would have made a difference, but at least it could have been something. It could have been something to build on. And this coaching staff, just decision after decision, that baffles me. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can blame on everybody else. When quarterbacks struggle, particularly highly drafted quarterbacks, they tend to, escape blame frequently from the fans, from the media. People blame the coaches. People blame the supporting cast. And if we're going to be clear here, this Jets coaching staff has done a miserable job. And the receiver group the Jets put on the field is not an NFL caliber receiver group. Not this receiver group that took the field against Carolina. Without Garrett Wilson in there, their number one guy is Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds is a guy who's been this team's 3rd leading receiver twice in an 8-year career. But you know what? Justin Fields is in year 5. Justin Fields is on his 4th coaching staff. Justin Fields is on his 3rd team. There's only so many excuses that can be made for Justin Fields. And Justin Fields got more opportunities than a lot of quarterbacks would have gotten. There are lots of quarterbacks who would have gotten benched before Justin Fields was. The Jets had to make this change. Unfortunately, Tyrod Taylor came in this game, and although he played better than Justin Fields, that's a very low bar, and that's not what the Jets need. And again, part of this I blame on the coaching staff, because could Tyrod Taylor have put 8 more points on the board if he had gotten a full week of reps installing the game plan, with the number one offense? When Tyrod briefly went in the first half when Fields was checked for a concussion, and the Jets had a penalty because Tyrod snapped the ball too quickly. You had Alan Lazard and Mason Taylor in motion. And, that's one of those things that, I chalk up to Taylor not working with the game plan. Going forward, I would assume Tyrod's going to be the starting quarterback. He kind of has to be. I mean, I don't think the Jets have any other choice but to move forward with Tyrod Taylor, at least for right now. So part of me gets on the coaching staff for not putting Tyrod in to start this week. Because if Tyrod had gotten a full week of reps, if they had installed the game plan with Tyrod, being the number one guy at practice, maybe they could have put together 1 or 2 more drives and won this game. But ultimately, I think we're seeing beyond any reasonable doubt that the Fields experiment is a complete failure for this team. The Jets took a shot on Justin Fields, and it just didn't work. And I think that we can say that the Justin Fields era is over. Maybe he ends up starting a few more games down the line. I mean, there could be more injuries at the quarterback position. I'm sure Tyrod's probably going to play himself out of the lineup at some point. But I think any chance of Justin Fields cementing himself as even a medium-term solution for the New York Jets is officially over after this game. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, Justin Fields was the number one problem, and Tyrod Taylor did not help things. But if we're going to be honest, this was a dreadful offensive performance from top to bottom for the Jets, and nobody can escape blame. Not the players, not the coaches, not the people who put this team together. I'm going to blame everybody as we continue here on this Sunday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Rippling. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS, that's SAD, software as a disservice. And that's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the united platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. By uniting your employees, teams, and departments in one system, Rippling removes the bottlenecks BusyWorks and silos your software created. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access runs automatically and perfectly in sync. It's seriously simple to use and gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything they touch. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or just fill in the gaps in your software stack, Rippling can do it all. And right now you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. Learn more at rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. That's rippling.com/LockedOnNFL for 6 months free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You can just pick more or less on player projections, like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. You can make your lineup in under a minute. And PrizePicks just added stacks, so if you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups in one click. And the new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. And there's a special max discount promotion live on the board right now. For the Golden State Warriors versus the Los Angeles Lakers game on October 21st, Steph Curry is discounted to only needing more than half a point to win. Mix and match players from football, baseball, and basketball to build your dream lineup today. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. On today's show, we are breaking down another New York Jets loss. The Jets are 0-7. They fell to the Carolina Panthers today at MetLife Stadium. The final score was 13-6. That tells the story, doesn't it? The Jets defense gave up 13 points. It is the second straight week the Jets defense gave up 13 points, and the Jets lost both games. The Jets did not score a touchdown this week, just like they did not score a touchdown last week. And in our first segment, we talked about the quarterbacks. There's nothing good you could say about New York Jets quarterbacks right now. They're getting play that you cannot win with at the quarterback position. But the problems do not end with the quarterbacks. And there are lots of different ways we could go with this discussion. I'm going to start by talking about the wide receivers, because you just can't expect an offense to be competitive in today's NFL with the wide receivers the Jets put on the field in this game. I mean, the guy who got the most targets in this game for the Jets was Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds is in his 9th season in the NFL. In his first 8 seasons, he has topped out as his team's 3rd leading receiver twice. And that is the guy who led the Jets in targets in this game. The Jets' leading receiver in this game, it was Tyler Johnson, who had 3 catches for 60 yards. Tyler Johnson is a guy who's been a career backup. And we can talk about some of the other guys. Allen Lazard, who, I don't know if you call it a drop. It was a catch he should have made. It was a bad throw by Tyrod Taylor on a trick play in the second half. The ball was badly underthrown, but that ball was there to be caught. Tyrod should have laid the ball out further. If he did, I mean, I still don't know if Lazard catches it because it's Lazard. It could have been a touchdown. But even though the ball was badly underthrown by Tyrod, that's a play Lazard needs to make. And it's this play Lazard needs to make under any circumstances, especially because he's such a big receiver. And that play embodies why Allen Lazard is so frustrating, is that, he's a big receiver, but he plays like a small receiver. He never wins a ball in the air. And he doesn't really do anything else effectively. Allen Lazard, through most of his career, has been, maybe a number 3 receiver. That's with Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. And he's developed decent chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. The 2 seasons Allen Lazard has not had Aaron Rodgers, he has been unplayable. That was true in 2023 when Rodgers went down in the first game. It's true again this year, where Lazard is doing nothing. The other guy I'm going to talk about, who I'm going to try to be less critical of because he's a rookie, but Arian Smith. There's been a lot of talk in this Jets fan base, people blaming Justin Fields for Arian Smith not producing. Well, Justin Fields was out in the second half. Arian Smith didn't do anything in this game. He was targeted 3 times. He had 1 catch for 0 yards. And there was a play in the second half where Tyrod Taylor put the ball where it needed to be. The ball was there to be won, and Arian Smith did not win it. And one of the issues with Arian Smith is that he's not great at tracking the football. And people see his 40 time, and they think he's a deep threat because he's got a great 40 time. There's more to being a great route runner on deep balls than a 40 time. Just being fast in a straight line is not enough. You got to know how to run routes. You got to know how to win the ball in the air. That was not like a ball that he had to like leap over someone. He didn't need to moss that one. That ball's one that if you want to be a deep threat, you got to catch in this league. Now, I know he's a rookie, so I'm not going to be as hard on him as I am on the other guys, but this is just not an acceptable group to be putting out there. And we know the Jets had issues this offseason. We know that they did not have a lot of resources to put together that wide receiver room, but there's no excuse for this. And the one thing the Jets really could not afford on this offensive side of the ball was to lose Garrett Wilson. And now that they've lost Garrett Wilson, you see how hopeless it is throwing the ball. You see the issues at quarterback. You see the issues at wide receiver. But I'm going to add something else here. I don't understand what Tanner Engstrand is doing. Think about how bad the Jets are getting, how bad the play is the Jets are getting at the quarterback position and the wide receiver position. The Jets ran the ball 4 times in the second half of this game. And this was a competitive game throughout. It ended, the final score was 13-6. It was 10-3 at halftime. The biggest lead Carolina had was 10 points. So it was always a competitive game. The Jets ran the ball 4 times in the second half. And it's worse than that because 2 of those runs were Tyrod Taylor scrambles. The Jets only ran 2 designed runs in the second half. How do you explain that? How do you justify that? And there were other issues with Engstrand in this game. That first series where if you're going for it on 4th down, you should have run the ball on 3rd down to try and get it as close as possible. Maybe a quarterback draw picks it up. And I just don't really understand what Engstrand's doing. Engstrand increasingly is looking like a guy who's completely in over his head. Over the course of the offseason, there were people I spoke with, sometimes we get a mailbag question about it. Jets fans would wonder, is this guy qualified to be an offensive coordinator? And I felt like he had the profile that he was the right sort of person the Jets should be hiring for the job. I have to say that, through 7 weeks of this season, the people who were skeptical were right. Engstrand looks like he's in completely over his head. And every week it feels like there's something new. I wrote an article yesterday on ganggreenNation.com about how Justin Fields is at the bottom when we talk about rates of passing attempts that either involve run pass options or play action. And those are plays that provide quarterbacks simpler reads, RPOs, because you're usually just reading one guy instead of the full field. Play action because you're kind of displacing defenders. You're trying to get defenders to bite on the run, which creates big passing lanes. And typically on play action passes, there are less receivers, so the read gets less complex. Justin Fields at the bottom of the league in those rates. And he should have been near the top before they pulled him. Because Justin Fields is a quarterback who's not a natural in the pocket. You don't want to have him running like a normal progression offense. But the Jets never gave him those easy throws while he was in the game. And look, you can't blame Engstrand for Fields failing. Fields has failed under other coaching staffs. He's failed on other teams. But I don't see how anybody can watch this offense, despite the lack of talent. And we can separate the talent from the coaching. What's the issue with the Jets offense? Well, it's more talent. It's always more talent. It's always about talent. It's a players' league. Coaches look good when their players play well. Coaches look bad when their players play poorly. But I don't know how you look at this offense and say it's well coached. I don't know how you look at this offense and say that this coordinator is putting guys in position to succeed. I don't know how you look at this offense and say the coordinator is putting the unit in a position to succeed. Because in a game where the Jets had their backup quarterback in, they had to put in Tyrod Taylor, who really did not play a very good game. And their receivers were Alan Lazard and Josh Reynolds and Tyler Johnson and Arian Smith. The Jets ran the ball twice in the second half. Twice. Those were two design run calls and then 2 Tyrod Taylor scrambles, but those were passing plays. Why would you get so pass happy in this situation? The Jets weren't playing from 21 points down. They weren't down 4 scores. They weren't down 5 scores. They were down 2 scores at most, and they were down 1 score for much of that game. And they just abandoned the run completely. It makes no sense. Nothing Tanner Engstrand does make sense. Tanner Engstrand is increasingly looking like a guy who should not be an offensive coordinator in this league. And that's just horrible. There's no excuse for that. I blame the quarterbacks most of all. I blame the roster construction over at the wide receiver position. But man, come on. Like, you do not even try and defend the game that Tanner Engstrand called, because it was a dismal, dismal coaching performance. Here on the Locked On Jets podcast, this Jets team's 0-7. It feels as bleak as it's ever felt. I don't want to say rock bottom, because we've had a lot of rock bottoms and it can always get worse. But what are the reasons for hope for this team? Well, at 0-7, we know this season is going to be a colossal failure. But their team is improving in one area, and the team just has to look to build from here. We'll try and chart the path forward as we continue here on this Sunday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel the craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery, and you can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda. Move and be moved. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, you can try player props, and you can even follow the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. Jets face the Bengals next weekend, and no surprise, the Bengals are 4.5-point favorites on FanDuel, coming off their big Thursday night upset over the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll watch that line. I would expect it to grow over the course of the week. If you want to get in on the action, though, FanDuel is the place to do it. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Sunday. The Jets fall to the Carolina Panthers 13-6 at MetLife Stadium. The Jets are now 0-7 in 2025. And I'm not going to lie to you, it feels really bleak right now with this football team. You could be the biggest pessimist in the world. I don't think you would have imagined the Jets would start this season 0-7. In fact, the people who are most pessimistic about this team heading into the season, all of them, at least from what I heard, said, the Jets may start 0-6, but they'll beat Carolina week 7 because Carolina is going to be awful. And even though the Panthers are 4-3 after this win, I didn't come away very impressed by them. And I think that's one of the frustrating things about this Jets season is there have been so many games through the first 7 where you didn't come away feeling like the opponent played all that well. Yet the Jets lost every single one of these games. So what do we even do to build from here? Now, one thing I will say, and I think this is going to be one of the themes of our shows this week, and if you're new to this show, this is a daily podcast. We have new episodes every day through the week. I think one theme I'm going to have this week is Aaron Glenn's got to get away from this "we're making progress" stuff. He can't say that. You have to have some degree of credibility when you speak about things like this. And the Jets have been planting these stories in the media. You can read them about how in Detroit's first year with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn was there, they weren't winning games, but they could see that they were making progress and it wasn't obvious. You know what? Progress is made on the field. The Jets are the practice champions of the NFL. The Jets, when it comes to practice, the Jets are the Kansas City Chiefs, if you ask them. Every Jets coach who fails here talks about how great their practice is every single week. The Jets need to stop talking about how the progress is being made, because we're not seeing progress made. The team's 0-7. The team's awful. The team looks hopeless on offense. If you're looking to hang your hat on something, I think the improvement in the defense the last 2 weeks is something to look to. I don't have a ton of confidence in this defense even now. It's only been 2 games, and we saw how bad they were the first 5 weeks of the season. It does feel like, though, you've seen improvement. And I was interested in how the defense would perform this week because part of me wondered whether the game against Denver was kind of a mirage, whether it was a combination of the Broncos not doing so well, the Jets maybe just having a hot week, some changes maybe sparked the team in the short run. We know the lineup changes that were made last week. Jermaine Johnson returning, Jarvis Brownlee going in at slot corner, Malachi Moore taking on a full-time starting role at safety. Sometimes you make a change and it doesn't last for the long run, but in the short run, you can spark yourself a little bit. And it did feel to me like last week, the Jets kind of shifted towards more of a bend but don't break approach, away from the typical Aaron Glenn attack defense. And it felt like that kind of stuck again this week, where the Panthers got on the board early in this game. They had 10 points in the first half, but I felt like the Jets, outside of like the one series where they gave up a touchdown, did a pretty good job at limiting the big plays. And Bryce Young missed some throws. There's no question about that. But a big part of a bend but don't break approach entails, waiting for your opponent to make a mistake. Bend but don't break. The theory behind it's not that you allow the team to gash you for 15 yards at a time and let them, drive down the field in 6 plays. The approach is that you avoid the play that destroys you. You avoid this 50-yard gain where you miss 3 tackles, and you force the offense to put together a long drive. And even pros, even NFL players, if you ask them to execute 10, 11, 12 straight plays, eventually they're going to make a mistake. I think the Jets have executed that at a pretty high level. I think for the most part, again, the touchdown drive was a little bit of an exception. They got a little sloppy there. For the most part, you've seen a lot of the coverage breakdowns go away. At least they're not happening at the rate they happened in the first 5 weeks. And I think you're not seeing the team as sloppy with its missed tackles. You're seeing improved play. I thought Sauce Gardner had a good game before he went out injured. I hesitate to say this. It does seem like Brandon Stevens is starting to play a little bit better. I don't have a lot of confidence in him going forward, but it feels like Stevens is starting to play a little bit better. You're seeing a defense that looked hopeless early in the season start to look better. Now, unfortunately, you're seeing an offense that looked credible through much of the early part of the season now look hopeless. But if you're looking for like some tangible sign of progress, and again, like I don't want to hear this, you can't see it, but we're getting better. I want to see like actual progress, because any progress that's not made on the field during games is meaningless progress. I think we are starting to see some progress from the defense. Now, is this just like a little 2-week blip on the radar and they're going to go back and, get torn up next week against our old friend Joe Flacco? That's something worth considering. But there's at least like maybe some sign of improvement from that unit. And I guess we're just kind of grasping at straws here with this team, because when you're 0-7 and when you've gotten to 0-7 the way the Jets have, there's not a lot good you can say. There's not a lot of room for optimism if we're being honest, but we are at least starting to see like little signs from the defensive side of the ball. Now, I'm assuming Tyrod Taylor starting next week, because I don't see what other choice the Jets have. I mean, what do you want to bring up the UDFA practice squatter Brady Cook to start with this group at wide receiver? Do you think that there's any chance that will be anything other than a disaster? I think at this point, really, the only chance the Jets have for a non-disaster performance on offense is to start Tyrod Taylor against Cincinnati in Week 8. Fields is just lost right now. I wouldn't be surprised, and nobody's going to want to hear this, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Fields before the end of the year, because I do think at some point Tyrod's going to play himself out of the lineup. But maybe Tyrod, the full week as the number one guy, give him the reps, get him the chance to work with the first team offense, install the game plan around him, put in a Tyrod Taylor specific game plan, because he and Fields are very different style quarterbacks. The plays you want to run for Fields are different from the ones you'll want to run for Tyrod. We'll see. Maybe putting the veteran in there can get us a better offensive performance. You got to hope, because it feels really hopeless around the Jets right now. We'll talk about that a lot going forward, because again, this is a daily podcast. We'll be back every day this week, but that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening, so you'll never miss an episode. Give it a 5-star review if you're listening on a podcast source, or a big thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody, and we'll be back tomorrow for our normal, regular Monday show.